All right, folks, good afternoon. It's just past 1 o'clock Eastern Time here, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar on security versus compliance. My name is Jeff Yeagley with Compass IT Compliance, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. So appreciate everybody taking the time out of their busy schedule to go ahead and join us today. I'm going to go over a couple of quick housekeeping items before I go ahead and introduce our presenter for today. So first things first is everyone's mics have been muted to minimize any type of distractions that occur during the webinar. Second thing, we are recording the webinar, so we will make this recording available on not only our website, but also our YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. And thirdly, I'll be sending out an email to everybody later today with a copy of the presentation, as well as a link to the recording of that webinar. So you can look forward to that as well. Last piece before I go ahead and introduce Pat is there is a chat feature. So at the end of the presentation, we will have some time available for a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and feel free to pop those right into the chat box. You can either address them to me directly. Again, my name is Jeff, and that's spelled with a G. Or you can address them to the entire group, and time permitting, we will make sure we get to those. If we don't have time at the end of the webinar, commit that we will get an answer to you either via phone or via email today. So that should cover the housekeeping items for now. I'm going to go ahead and introduce today's topic, as I already did, and as well as our presenter. So we're going to talk about security versus compliance, right? It's kind of the age-old question, which one came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Which one should I be focusing on? Obviously, there's a lot of compliance requirements out there. But we want to talk today about how security can help you with those compliance requirements and which one not necessarily is more important, but which one your organization should really be focused on to make the other one a little bit easier. So that's the topic we'll be hitting today. Let me introduce Pat. Many of you are probably familiar with Pat since he just did our December webinar. We're keeping him pretty busy over here. So Pat is one of our senior IT auditors, works with a number of our clients across a variety of different industries, from retail and merchants to healthcare to government entities. So Pat is very, very well versed in not only the security end of things, but also the compliance requirements that a lot of industries face, and sometimes the multitude of compliance requirements that they face. So without further ado, I'm going to quiet down and I'm going to turn it over to Pat to go ahead and take us through the presentation. Take it away, Pat.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate it. And we'll just dive right into it here. All right, so this is just kind of the agenda of what we're going to talk about today, kind of what Jeff already touched on. We're going to go over what exactly is security, what is compliance, and then really the differences between security and compliance, as he had previously touched on there. We'll also touch on some security and compliance challenges that we see in a lot of organizations, and maybe some things you can do to kind of work around those, as well as how to develop a culture of security to make it important and prioritized in your organization, and just kind of the ways we can go about doing that. And then as Jeff touched upon, we'll answer some questions at the end, time permitting, of course. So first off, what is security? So security is the state of being free from danger, protecting that key information. We want to protect our assets using different things such as technology, that being, passwords, encryption, our intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems that we have, firewalls, things of that nature, as well as our processes, that being our policies, our procedures, which is kind of the lifeblood of an organization. We want to have, I like to think of it as that set of rules that we abide by. So that being our employees, what they're allowed to do, what they should be doing, as well as how we handle sensitive data. So that's kind of from a procedure and policy standpoint, we want to make sure we have those in place and that we adhere to them. And then finally, training our employees, because they're really our first line of defense, as well as the lifeblood of the organization. If we have the best policies and procedures in the world, but our employees aren't trained and aren't following those procedures, does it really matter in the end? So we want to make sure we focus on making security a priority and want to make it that culture of security, so that it's more of a proactive thing rather than a reactive thing. We just want to make sure that it's important for all departments to focus on security, not just IT. That going back to the whole proactive versus reactive thing. Oftentimes we'll see, someone clicked on a link they shouldn't have clicked on, and then it's a reactive effort from the IT department to try to segment and secure that security breach. Whereas if we were being proactive and educating our employees on what to look for, as well as what they can and cannot do, maybe we would have avoided that altogether. So we want to make sure all departments, whether it's people that are handling cards regularly, that being payment cards or whatever the sensitive data may be, we want to make sure they're educated, as well as the folks that maybe they come across that sensitive data rarely. We want to be well-rounded. Security awareness training, it should be consistent and not just on an annual event. We want to make sure we're staying up to date with the latest security threats that are always out there. Unfortunately, in the world we live in today, there's always a new threat. We want to make sure we're educated on what we can do to mitigate our risk there. So moving right along. So what is compliance, and how is compliance a little different than security? So compliance means conforming to a rule, really, just complying with a set of guidelines, if you will. So what we see often is there's many different standards that organizations are required to comply to, or that they maybe just want to comply just for their own general well-being, so that they know they're secure. Anything from PCI, that's dealing with credit card security and credit card information, how we're processing and how we're storing that information, to we deal with HIPAA high tech a lot. I've done quite a few of those audits, and that's dealing with the medical charts and PII, healthcare information. So there's many different facets there, and what you'll often find is that the guidelines themselves and the standards themselves may differ a little bit, but the meat and potatoes of it all, of how we're securing that information, is really the same. Whether it's that sensitive credit card data, or if it's someone's personal information or healthcare information, the information may change, but the guidelines of how we're securing it, having certain things in place, having our policies in place, having that security awareness to educate our employees, a lot of that stays the same. So the data may be swapped out, but a lot of the general rules still apply. And then there's things such as, just the NIST, cybersecurity, and that's a great place to begin, just to kind of make sure you have a good grasp on your own IT security controls that you currently have in place and what you can work towards. And then just a general, security versus compliance. We're going to touch on that quickly. So it's important to understand that they're not exactly the same thing. Security measures are there to protect your information from a threat, whether that's your intrusion prevention system or intrusion detection. So we're aware of threats and how we can prevent them, from anything to our firewalls. We're keeping bad things out and threats out. And then there's the compliance aspect of it that kind of just adds that layer of security to your organization. That being, you've had a third party such as Compass or whatever third party that may be come in and perform that audit and kind of give you that certificate, let you know that, hey, you have done the appropriate things to be in compliance. And if you're not there yet, here's what we can do to work towards getting to that place of compliance. They're important factors in mitigating an organization's risk of a breach. The example I like to give there, and this has been given this many times, is if we have two companies, right? And if we're talking, let's say we're talking PCI here, so credit card security. We have two different organizations. One of them has had a third party come in. They've done a PCI report on compliance. They've got everything checked off. They're good to go. They've passed, right? So now they can throw up on their website, we are PCI compliant. Then we have another organization on the other side that, maybe they are in fact compliant, but they haven't had that audit done. They haven't had the proof of compliance. So they don't have that tag. Now, who are these outside organizations going to want to do business with? Well, they're going to want to use the company that's PCI compliant to store their data, because they're going to feel more comfortable themselves knowing that they're with a company that's PCI compliant. These days, a lot of organizations won't even do business with companies that aren't in that state of compliance, which is the harsh truth. So you want to make sure you're always working towards that. And then kind of on the other end there, if we're playing devil's advocate here, from a hacking perspective, if a hacker was going to try to breach your data, and they got the two companies there, one with that PCI compliant certification and then one that doesn't, who are they going to try to breach? Why would they waste their time trying to break into an organization that is compliant and has those appropriate security measures in place when they can just go with the one that hasn't gone through that? It really kind of adds that second layer of defense. It's kind of like having outside your house, you have that security, that tag that says, hey, we have security here, the ADT. I like to give that example, the ADT security flag. Burglar's not going to go to that house, but they're going to go to the house that doesn't have that. So it's kind of that tag there. Then we're just going to touch on some security challenges that we often see with companies. There's always new threats coming out, and hackers are being more and more advanced on the ways they do things. So we often find that companies struggle to stay up to date with those. So it's important to try to make that a priority. One of the newest ones that I've seen lately is with thermostats. These newer thermostats are connected to Wi-Fi networks, and hackers are now able to hack into the thermostat because there's not much security there. And from there, once they're in your network, if that thermostat is attached to the network, they can kind of move around in the network there and get to other sensitive data potentially. And that's kind of the second bullet point there, lateral hacker movement and breach containment. That's a big issue, kind of like I just said. Once they're in, and they can kind of move about. And we often find that companies struggle to segment and maintain that breach if it was to occur. And then just in general, stitching together your security program. We go into these places and a lot of them are using different products and different measures for different things. One company does this for you and one product does this. And, with that, there's always some gaps. And that just seems to be a common challenge that a lot of organizations deal with. And then this number on the bottom here, bottom bullet, the average cost of data breach in 2017 was 3.62 million. And that's just, it's scary to look at, but that is the reality. Breach can be devastating to a business, not only financially, but, with the reputation of the business. No one's going to want to do business with you because they don't feel secure. They don't feel safe giving you their data. So that's a big one there. I think, we can all agree on that it's costly, and we'd rather prioritize our resources in being proactive to get in security and get compliant than to be reactive and have to deal with that big cost there, the 3.62 million. That's just terrible. And then some compliance challenges that we often see. Employees play an important role in protecting confidential data. As I stated before, the employees are the first line of defense. If our employees aren't properly trained and our employees are on board with the security program, then it really doesn't matter. We can throw it out the window, because if our employees aren't totally there, trained and know what to do in a given situation, then really it doesn't matter, and then laptops and mobile devices. We often find that organizations struggle to have the appropriate measures on these laptops, mobile devices, and regulate them so that they are secure in the event of a breach, or let's say somebody loses their cell phone or their laptop and it's got sensitive data to your business on it. Then it's we want to make sure we have the appropriate controls in place if someone was to get their hands on that, so they can't get in there and get our data. And then another big one here, the second bullet point there, is the cloud service providers. Ensure that your customers' data is properly protected and in compliance with all relevant regulations. So often, there's these cloud hosted companies that are hosting other people's data. They're storing other people's data, and you want to make sure that you're in compliance so that you can feel comfortable hosting others' data. You don't want to be responsible for someone else's information if you're not in compliance and you're not secure yourself. So that's a big no-no. And that's often one that we see a lot, that's becoming more and more popular, everything being hosted in the cloud. We want to make sure that we are securing that data appropriately. It's important not to confuse cyber awareness programs with security training. It's good to be generally cyber aware of the latest threats, as I talked about. What's going on in in the cyber world and cybersecurity world. Um, but more importantly, security training to our employees is huge. Um, because it's important that they are educated and know the appropriate ways to handle, whether it be that credit card information, whether it be that sensitive healthcare information. We want our customers to feel comfortable when they do business with us, and that's a little different than just being cyber aware. But we want to make sure we have both facets there. And jumping down to the fourth bullet point here, don't forget anyone and don't make security awareness optional. Security awareness training should be given out to everyone in the organization, whether it's the CEO at the top all the way down to the employee that's been there a day. We want to make sure everyone goes through the same training and that it's regulated and that it's thorough. And it could be, I always give this example of, we got to train everyone, either, even if it's just the janitor that comes in at night. We want to make sure they're aware of the appropriate the current threats and what the appropriate action is to do if you do see something. They want to make sure you can go and report it to the appropriate person, and it can be handled accordingly, because you never know when that scenario is going to come up. So everyone needs to be well versed, whether it's the person that's dealing with the information 99% of the time, or it's that rare occasion. We just want to make sure we're well rounded and have everyone educated. So that kind of brings me to the next point there at the bottom. If you see something, say something. It's better to see it and have a false alarm than it is to just kind of let it go unnoticed, if you will, and have an issue later. And then just ways to develop a culture of security, instilling the concept that security belongs to everyone. And that's kind of what I just touched on earlier. It's important that we have everyone in the organization on the same page when it comes to our security program. Top to bottom, everyone's involved in some aspect, and they need to do their part in complying with those policies and procedures that we set in place, as well as the technology, and making sure that they've gone through the appropriate training, those 3 items that we touched on at the beginning about security. So we want to develop that culture. We want to make security a good thing. It can be scary and intimidating to some folks, but we really want to embrace that and be proactive about it and make sure we make it a priority. And then rewarding and recognizing those people that do the right thing for security. If somebody, the example I just gave previously, if somebody sees something and they go ahead and they bring it to their manager's attention or whoever that appropriate person is, we want to make sure we reward them, even if it is a false alarm. You don't want to discourage them and say, "Oh, you wasted my time," because then next time they won't report it, and you could have a big issue on your hands. So we want to make sure that that's a positive thing, and we really want to have everyone involved in building that security community. And then making security fun and engaging. A good way I see companies do that is finding relevant articles of things going on in the cybersecurity world today, different threats that are coming out, because some of them are, I hate to say, but some of them are kind of neat and entertaining. So people like to read about those. And, if you kind of send those out, hey, maybe send one out a month or one out every 2 weeks, whatever the case may be, it kind of lets people know of things, just so that they're thinking about it and they're thinking in that state of mind. So that's it's kind of a fun way to incorporate that, rather than just put the PowerPoint up and look at this. So that kind of makes it more fun and engaging, having a discussion about things like that. And then just what exactly is security awareness training? It's a formal process for educating employees about anything cybersecurity related, or anything security related in general, not just cybersecurity related. But we want to make sure that they've gone through that training. And typically what we see is, an interactive training course with upper management to educate the employees and let them know of how to handle that sensitive data, as well as how to how to secure it. If they were in a retail building or something in that case, how to handle closing up the building, anything from that nature, what to look out for. An example I have here is, when I was doing a PCI audit for a gas station, they hadn't undergone any security awareness training. Went out to one of the pumps, and we're looking at the tag there, or where you swipe your card. There was actually a skimmer right there on it, and they just didn't know what to look for. They weren't doing any tampering checks. They didn't recognize it at all. So I look at it and I see it and I say, hey, what is that? You know what that is? And they had no idea. It's not their fault. They just hadn't undergone that security training. Um, so they weren't well versed in that. And then, they needed to implement that training program to make sure if that was to ever happen again, they could do the appropriate actions. You want to make it an ongoing thing, not just an annual exercise. A lot of these regulations and standards do require only annually, but we like to see it more often than that. The more the better, to be honest. But business trumps that, and we want to make sure we're at least doing it annually, as well as sending out those security reminders if something is going on. Such as this. The ransomware attacks that we've seen recently, the WannaCry Act and all those different ones. We want to make sure we're up to date on those and educating the appropriate people. And then the importance of security awareness training. We need security awareness training to comply with the required regulations, kind of as I just touched on. PCI requires companies to go through security awareness training. HIPAA is the same thing. Every regulation that I've dealt with and every standard that I've dealt with requires it to some degree, some more than others. And they require, evidence of that. So it can't just be a policy saying, hey, we're going to do security awareness training, once a year. They want to see what exactly you're doing for the training, what that material is. So they need you to produce evidence of that. So it's important to have a good program in place. And then just constant changes in the threat landscape. There's always different things going on, and they're always finding a different way to exploit systems. As I touched on earlier, with that, the ransomware, CEO fraud, phishing is always a common one. Send out a link to, hey, there's free movie tickets, free iPod, free whatever the case is. Click this link, and more often than not, you'll have a few people in an organization click it, and we do some of that too as well. For organizations, we'll do phishing tests, and you'd be surprised at how many people will go ahead and click on that. And it comes back to us, and we try to let them know and educate them that, if you see something like this in the future and it looks a little fishy, go ahead and tell someone. So that's, all the different aspects of the security awareness training program. And that kind of wraps it up there. Just through the resources here. And all this will be sent out to you guys, as Jeff had previously touched on. So I'm actually going to turn it back over to Jeff, and he can take it away.
Awesome, Pat. Thanks. Great job, man. Appreciate it. It's funny. We talk about this with, many of our clients and prospective clients about, building that culture of security, right? And Pat, as you had kind of mentioned and alluded to, if you see something, say something. It really comes down to just asking really just one more question than what you're thinking, right? Like some examples might be, did I really win the lottery? Or does that sound like it might be a little bit too good to be true? This person who I've never seen before that's asking me to hold the door open for them because they forgot their badge. Does that sound, should I do that? Is that in accordance with what my company would want me to do? So I'll tell you guys a very, very quick story about, I don't know, because I'm a work for Compass or whatever the case might be, and it may be because on our blog I kind of pick on people that send phishing emails, but I seem to have gotten an uptick in phishing emails over the past 6 or 7 months. And so if you ever want to check those out, go to our blog, because I kind of pick them apart and show people kind of, some of them look better than others, and that's the dangerous piece, right? Is that just as we're working hard to train people and educate people on what to look for, these attackers are working harder and harder to make them look better and better and more legitimate. So if you ever want to take a peek out there, you can feel free to go ahead and do so. The recent one was a alleged DocuSign document for my W-2 from Compass, but it was sent to 30 different people, which I thought was odd. That was the first thing. And but the actual DocuSign logo, everything looked very legitimate. So we used to be on the state, actually we still are on the state of North Carolina contract for security assessment services, and their um, vendor relations department called me. This is about 6 or 7 months ago, and wanted to just review some information about Compass to make sure that we were registered appropriately in their system. Da, 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 da. So they called, which is fine. However, they came up from a Philadelphia phone number. I don't know. I'm the type of guy that just looks at the caller ID and can know based on previous sales history where most area codes are. So I noticed it was a little bit odd, and I kind of interrogated the guy around, hey, if you're with the state of North Carolina vendor system, why are you calling me from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania? That just kind of seems weird to me. It doesn't really add up to me. So anyway, turns out he was legit, and everything was good. He was actually a third party that they had hired to do a lot of the data input. But the point of the matter is asking the next logical question, right? Had I just been like, oh, sure, yeah, here's our tax ID, here's our federal employee identification number, here's this, here's that, who knows where that ends up at the end of the day? So asking that next logical question, like, if you're from North Carolina, why are you calling me from Pennsylvania? That's a little weird. And getting verification, again, and really what this comes down to is all of your employees don't have to be security experts. They just have to ask that next question. So perceived threats, right? If you think it sounds weird or think it sounds fishy, just ask the question and see and direct it to the appropriate resource within your organization. So anyway, I'll quiet down, sort of. But Pat, thank you. Awesome job. Folks, we do have time for a few questions here. So if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat box there. Again, you can address them just to me. If you want, and we can get those answered for you. So we've had two questions that came in here that I want to kind of throw your way, Pat. So the first one is, where should an organization start when it comes to compliance? Is there a recommended standard to begin with?
I would say, Jeff, it really depends on what organization or what your organization does. As I touched on with PCI and HIPAA a lot, if you're in the healthcare field, you definitely want to work towards being HIPAA compliant. So that would be a good place to start there. Or if you're in the PCI field where you're dealing with a lot of credit card transactions, that's a big one to work towards, a PCI risk assessment. That's a great way to start. But if you're not in one of those, direct fields, and maybe you use something a little different, but you still want to make sure you have that level of compliance and security, something like just a NIST cybersecurity is a great place to start. That's actually what I would recommend, because it covers all facets of cybersecurity without, drilling down specifically on something like credit card information or that healthcare information. So it's a very well-rounded one and a good place to start.
Excellent. Yeah, that is a great place to start, especially for those organizations that, might be in a situation where they say, hey, we don't handle any credit card data, although I'm not sure those companies, those are more rare these days, or healthcare information, but organizations still need to put these practices in place and make security a focus. So that's an awesome recommendation here. The second question we have is, and I love this question actually, because this is one that we talk about all the time. You mentioned to have security awareness training more than just annually, right, to kind of meet that compliance requirement. How often should it be done?
It really depends on what you can afford to do. But I would say definitely at least annually, just, to meet that compliance requirement. But what I would recommend is something like biannually, in addition to always sending out, those security kind of reminders. If something's current in the news right now, with all the ransomware and all these different attacks that are going on, to have maybe your information security officer send out, even just an email of, hey, watch out for this, be extra careful when it comes to suspicious emails and looking at them. If you have any questions, feel free to direct them my way, something along those lines. And that can be periodic, time to time, whenever they see that fitting. But obviously, the more often you can afford to do that security awareness training, the better. But I would say biannually would be a great starting point.
Awesome. It's a great recommendation. And you're absolutely right, because you never know what those threats are, but keeping your employees, informed, updated, however you want to phrase it, is incredibly important. I mean, just to kind of touch on what's in the news. And of course, we don't know what the cause of this is, but look at the city of Atlanta right now. Unfortunately, I think they're on day 6 now of suffering through a ransomware attack. And we don't know whether it was an employee clicking on a link in a phishing email or if it was through, some type of exploit that was done by these attackers. But the point of the matter is that 6 days being, I don't want to say out of business, but essentially out of business, right? That I read yesterday, they're resorting back to paper and pen, right? They're going old school and having to write everything down. You don't want to put your business in that type of position. So whatever you have to do to train your employees, bolster your technology, do vulnerability scans, make sure that your perimeter is secure. It's like, if you lived in a not so good area of town and said, I'm just going to leave my doors and windows open and see what happens. Well, you can't kind of complain when something bad happens because you kind of took that calculated risk, right? And it didn't work out in your favor. So training your employees and not just checking the box is super, super important. So I appreciate that. That's good feedback, Pat, for sure. So folks, I don't see any other questions that came in. So speak now or ask now or forever hold your peace, I guess is the way we'll kind of end this out here. So Pat, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day and out of your schedule to go ahead and create the presentation and then share this with everybody. Folks that were able to jump on, thank you for taking the time out of your day, especially towards the end of the work week. I appreciate you taking some time to spend with us and learn about this and hear Pat present this. So again, I will be sending out a link to the recording as well as a copy of the slide deck later today or tomorrow at the absolute latest. So look forward to that coming. And then also, we'll be hosting our next webinar at the end of April, and we're going to talk about, speaking of a good place to start, and it's not the NIST cybersecurity framework, but we're going to talk about the update that just came out to the Center for Internet Security's top 20 critical security controls, because there are some significant changes that took place in this latest revision, which came out a week ago. So look forward to the information on that being posted to our site and sent out to everybody. With that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.